Hello, everyone. This is an especial honor to be at this kind of opening session for this wonderful occasion. I'm Justina Parsons-Bernstein. I'm the Heritage, Interpretation, and ADA Resources Coordinator for the Utah State Park System. And I guess we should throw up my PowerPoint. The rest of our people are going to go and introduce themselves as we come down the line. So as soon as we throw that up, I'll get going. But as you can see, one of the first slides we're going to see is this timeline. Did everybody see this timeline? We threw this together because as we started talking, we thought it was important that everyone see the depth and breadth of stuff that's going on in Utah and why this was such a great place to hold these conferences. So, my part will be coming up soon, I think. But anyway, there are 10 international dark sky parks in Utah. 4 of those are Utah state parks. There's a list of all of us here on this panel. I'm going to talk a bit about the Utah State Parks Dark Sky Initiative. And the dark sky activity in Utah State Parks started with the parks. Crystal White of Dead Horse Point State Park and Nathan Martinez of Goblin Valley State Park. And you can go ahead and hit, am I supposed to hit through too, or is somebody else going to go through? Because you can, okay. Next slide, please. So this was, as I say, started with our parks, and these folks in our southern parks were very much tuned into the formation of the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative, and did some trainings in 2012, and in 2013, both Crystal and Nathan started working on becoming international dark sky parks, the Dead Horse Point State Park and Goblin Valley State Park. In 2015, Crystal offered to hold an annual interpretive training for all of our park staff, and Crystal said, hey, I'd like to give a session on dark sky. And also Jim Wells, who had gone to Goblin Valley by that time and was helping work on the stuff, said he would tell folks how to do a star party, and she wanted to talk about dark sky in our parks. From that initial training, we had 10 parks come to me and said, Justina, we want to do this too, but we need your help. So I thought, how can I help these folks? 10 parks going for it at once. What can we do? So I reached out, put out a notice for dark sky intern, and the lovely Betty Maya Foote sent me this sweet email and said, hey, I wrote an undergraduate thesis on a dark sky topic. If you want to read it, here it is, and I'm very interested in this internship position. I read her thesis, and then I called her and I said, you come and help me. So for the first few months, about the first 5-6 months, beginning in November 2015, we started to think how the best way would be to go about getting 10 parks at once, their initial dark sky measurements and everything else they needed to do to start them on their way. So we figured that out. Then we figured we needed more help. It was a crazy, on the road a lot, up all night, and Betty Maya likes her sleep. I tried to disabuse her of that, but she kept saying she needed sleep. Anyway, we brought next slide, please. Next slide, please. This just shows you, I'm sure you've heard already, but we're high, dry, and shielded. That's why we make such a fantastic place here in Utah to have dark sky areas. Next slide, please. So these 4 parks are already our 4 international dark sky parks, and that's a great picture of Crystal receiving her designation. This was our first international dark sky park, and she's, huzzah, there we are. And then, so they attained designation in 2016, as did Goblin Valley, and you can see Antelope Island, and Wendy Wilson will talk more to that in a minute, was in 2017, and Steinecker State Park in 2018. Anyway, next slide, please. These are the 10 parks that came to us and said they wanted help, positioned all around the state. They wanted help in pursuing this designation. Next slide, please. So my lovely dark sky interns and volunteers helped me with this process as we went around and took the 4 sets of dark sky readings and did dark sky mapping and many other things with these parks and talked to them about changing out their lightscape, and everybody was working on it together. And we couldn't have done this without interns and volunteer help. Next page. And this is, as you'll learn as we talk more, that this is such a collaborative and collegial effort here in Utah. even though I like to kind of say that, you know, state parks are better than national parks, I don't really mean it, because we're all in this together, and we're all sister organizations, and we love each other and we help each other. And seriously, the rangers from the national parks help us. There they are jumping for joy when Dead Horse Point got their designation. And over in our vernal area parks, Steinecker State Park and Red Fleet, the Dinosaur National Monument folks are very into coming over and helping us, and we do whatever we can do to help them. Clark Planetarium, Duke Johnson up there, has offered us training in astronomy and also just telescope training, and we held a telescope training for Utah State Parks staff and anyone else who was interested of our sister organizations out at Antelope Island. And the University of Utah, Paul Ricketts and his crew for the Southern Observatory at the U of U, they come out and help us put on dark sky events as well. So it's so very collaborative and supportive. It is just, it's wonderful to be a part of something like this, because we all help each other. There's nobody tearing each other down, and there's no jealousy. Next. And that goes for also the leadership of state parks. They passed the governing board of state parks passed a resolution in favor of dark sky attainment where it seemed to make sense. So that was a really great moment too, and that was 100% unanimous, and they're all really, really in favor of dark sky parks. So that's wonderful for us. So our people can make a dark sky program out of anything. It's not just star parties. So, you know, anything we do at night, our scorpion safaris, owl, bat programs, other kinds of night wildlife, we talk about dark skies. To unify our messages, we have about a 20-foot, and I'm not even exaggerating, a banner that I printed out for each of the parks that does dark sky education, and they roll it out and they talk before it gets totally dark. They go down the panels and people can ask questions. And so you can do dark sky education anywhere. We have community forums. As you can see, there's a couple of those. Like, where over 100 people will show up and learn about dark skies. There's night full moon events like snowshoes and cross-country skiing and full moon hikes that, 200 people will show up for. And so we can get the message out to such a diverse array of people because they're all attracted to different elements, so that we can get this message out to people that, they love bats but they didn't know about dark sky stuff, or they love full moon snowshoes but they didn't happen to know about dark sky stuff. So we can introduce that stuff to them. Next slide. And we've seen this prove out, that we have become designations for people to come, astrotourists to come from around the world. These little boys on the very far end were from Shanghai. There was a family from Shanghai that came to one of our most remote parks, Gooseneck State Park, right down on the Arizona border, and also a family from the Netherlands that I met at the same star party that had sought out Gooseneck State Park because they had heard it had such dark skies. So people are coming from around the world because of our dark skies.
Agencies and citizens in a collaborative effort to celebrate the view of the cosmos, minimize the impact of outdoor lighting, and protect natural nighttime skies and restore natural darkness in areas where it has been degraded. I have a new flyer that I created that kind of gives an overview. If you'd like one, come see me. I have a box of them. These objectives, there's 5 of them, and whenever I'm doing work for the plateau, I try and categorize these different activities so they fit within these objectives. So establishing a dark sky network, all of you, people who are involved in dark sky conservation, connecting people, outreach and education, huge part. Creating actionable tools, guides, and resources, as well as connecting people with these tools. Training and technical assistance, and then, of course, promotion and marketing. So those are our 5 objectives. Go ahead, thanks. So this is a list of accomplishments thanks to Nate and Betty Maya. I cannot claim any of these. So I'm not going to read through all of them, but they've done so much to promote dark skies throughout the Colorado Plateau. Just to highlight a couple, they trained a bunch of guides and outfitters engaging in over 40,000 to 50,000 trip participants annually. Assisted 17 communities with lighting ordinances and night sky civic engagement, and I think that number is going up. There's several communities that have reached out to me asking to review their lighting ordinances, asking for the next steps, and then I always defer to my brain trust of experts. They've participated in 170 plus online print and TV media stories. 170, that's incredible. Next slide, please. So how does dark sky conservation fit into community development? I tell people that I do this as part of my state job, and they kind of scratch their heads and try and figure out how does that fit? And this is how I help people understand. So community development, to me, is an ongoing process. And this infographic is meant to depict that process. And you can see that it's an infinity loop because you're never quite done. We're always updating our general plans. It's an ongoing process. So these 6 different activities are what help create a strong community, help communities develop as well as improve quality of life. Lots of the times, especially in government, we like to focus on economic development and call that community development. But in reality, it's all these different things working together. It's actually based on FEMA's recovery, or, sorry, my voice is shaking, can you tell? Thanks, Justina. Whew, it's a lot of people. FEMA's National Recovery Framework. These are the key recovery support functions. So if you think about it, if there's a disaster, these are the things that create that strong foundation. So how does dark skies fit into this? Leadership and civic engagement. We want engaged, educated citizens. They're not going to care about dark skies if they don't understand why they need to care. Natural and cultural resources, obviously. This is both. Infrastructure and public services, working with power companies to place power lines underground so you can see the stars, becoming more energy efficient. Health and social services, understanding the health concerns related with artificial light at night. Housing, how can dark skies increase property values? What are the implications? And then economic development, astrotourism, and saving on energy costs. So next slide. These are some things that I've been working on, and you'll have to come see me, and I'll show you some of them. But I think what I'm most proud of is a way to track progress. They always tell you if you can't measure success, then you're not successful. So the metric I'm going by is international dark sky designations. Is this a goal to work towards a way to quantify success in the Colorado Plateau? So I created a spreadsheet. It's just a Google spreadsheet. I send it out once a month to my stakeholders asking for feedback. What communities are you aware that are working on dark sky conservation? Can you please add some data to this? And then I update that, and it populates this dashboard that people can access online. And maybe I'll show it to you later. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, good. All right, good afternoon. My name is Zach Schierl. I work for the National Park Service based out of Cedar Breaks National Monument, about 3 hours. 2 roles there. In the summer, I work as our lead park ranger. If you've ever been to Cedar Breaks before, we're at an elevation of 10,500 feet. It's a little snowy, hard to get to most of the year. So I spend my fall, winter, and spring doing mostly community outreach on dark skies for Cedar Breaks. And so this afternoon, I wanted to share with you one of the really cool programs that we've developed over the last couple years, our Master Astronomer program, which as far as we know is kind of a one-of-a-kind program. So I want to talk a little bit about how we developed it and what it's doing for dark sky preservation in southern Utah. Next slide. Before I go any farther, though, I just want to recognize a couple folks. I'm the one that is lucky enough to talk to all of you today. This has really been a group effort. We have a pretty small staff, a pretty small park, and we've relied a lot on volunteers and interns to help us develop the Master Astronomer program and some of our other efforts and programs over the last few years. In particularly, the woman in the middle of the photograph here, Lisa Ricci, extremely talented astronomy and dark skies educator that's been working with us for several years, has kind of co-developed everything that I'm about to explain with me, and so just wanted to mention them and the support that they've given over the last few years. Next slide. So astronomy programs, stargazing programs have become pretty, I think, ubiquitous in the national parks over the last decade or so. We have a series of very popular star parties that we lead at Cedar Breaks every weekend during the summer, pictured here. And they've been very popular. It's by far our most popular program at Cedar Breaks. I think this summer we averaged about 200 or 300 people every time we offered one of those events. And the thing is, though, staff started to notice a few years ago that most of the people attending these programs were from out of state and even out of country. I would say at a typical star party at Cedar Breaks, I talked to more people from Germany than from Utah, and especially from some of the local cities that surround Cedar Breaks. So that's great. This is a really powerful way for us to spread the dark sky message far and wide. But a couple years ago, our staff started to notice that we weren't really, these programs weren't really reaching the people whose decisions about lighting had the greatest impact on our skies. Next slide. Cedar Breaks is within about an hour of two very rapidly growing cities, Cedar City and St. George. St. George was actually just named the fastest growing metropolitan area in the countries. So we're up against some very rapid growth in our area that's threatening our dark skies. These are some measurements of sky glow from the National Park Service night sky team on the top, and then a DSLR photograph on the bottom. You can see Cedar City on the right, and St. George on the left. And so the thought was, okay, how do we, if we're really serious, we got our International Dark Sky Park certification back in March 2017. Our staff said, if we're really serious about protecting the night skies at Cedar Breaks for future generations, we really need to engage with these communities more directly. We're sitting up here at Cedar Breaks doing our star parties and talking to people from all over the world. That's great, but we're not reaching the people who are the source of the greatest threat to our night skies. And so that was kind of the impetus behind my position, was to really develop some community programs that would take the importance of dark skies to our local gateway communities and hopefully promote the preservation of our skies via those programs. So like I said, we've developed a number of programs over the past few years. The one that has kind of occupied the most of our time, if we can go to the next slide, is what we call our Master Astronomer program. And the short version of this, how many of you have either taken or are at least familiar with like the Master Gardener program or Master Naturalist programs, right? So my 5-second elevator pitch is this is that, but for astronomy and dark skies. It is a 40-hour workshop aimed at local citizens that we have developed over the past few years. It teaches local citizens about astronomy and the night sky, how to use telescopes, the importance of night sky preservation, and then also importantly teaches them to be, essentially trains them to be stewards of those dark night skies. We teach kind of basic communication and outreach skills in addition to all of the content. Next slide. So this is not, this is not an astronomy course. It's not an astronomy class. It's a community outreach program. Our curriculum kind of weaves together 4 different themes. Obviously, our hook for a lot of folks is astronomy and the night sky, but we also teach people how to use telescopes. We talk about the importance of night sky preservation, and then those communication skills as well. And in line with the Master Naturalist and Master Gardener programs, in order to get a Master Astronomer certificate, they have to commit to at least 10 hours of volunteer outreach in astronomy and dark skies education. So again, this is aimed at citizens of Cedar City and St. George, which are kind of our 2 closest gateway communities. Next slide. We are currently in the midst of teaching our 4th workshop. We've done 3 in Cedar City, 1 down in St. George. We've had 45 people participate. 25 of them have graduated and met all of our requirements. That number is going to go up here in a few weeks when our fall 2018 class finishes up. And we've really created a really awesome community of dark sky advocates via this program. Our graduates have recorded over 1,000 hours of volunteer service so far. which has just been phenomenal. We have had one of our graduates ran for city council in Cedar City last year. We have the mayor of one of our local gateway communities participating in our present class. 5 of our graduates have actually gone on to be employed by the National Park Service doing astronomy outreach all over the country. You can see some of them there in the photograph on the lower right. And it's just really raised awareness of this issue in our area. Next slide. We're hoping that this is just kind of the start of what this program could do for dark sky preservation, both here in Utah and beyond. We're hoping as we go into 2019 to explore ways to expand this program to other parks and other communities that might be interested in engaging their communities more deeply on dark sky issues. We have a handbook that Lisa and I have authored and an instructor's guide that basically explains how to teach this program. That's kind of being finished. We're putting the finishing touches on that right now and hope to make it publicly available soon for other folks that are interested in this. We're exploring the opportunity of hosting a Train the Trainer workshop in southern Utah this winter. And then we're also working with Justina and Mark Casanova with the Utah Master Naturalist Program to hopefully adapt some of our curriculum and lessons that we've developed to be a dark sky module for the State Master Naturalist Program. Next slide. So if you have questions or want to learn more about this, please come see me at some point over the next few days. Like Aubrey, I have a stack of handouts that kind of explains the background and goals of this program a little bit more, and I'd love to chat with you more about it. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cooper Farr. I am the director of Tracy Aviary's Conservation Science Program. So Tracy Aviary is an AZA accredited zoo. We're located just in downtown Salt Lake City. We house, over 400 birds of hundreds of species. But we're also an organization that works on local bird conservation issues, and we do that through research and outreach. And we often involve the community and especially citizen scientists in our work. So several years ago now, Jess Dwyer with the Salt Lake chapter of IDA approached the aviary with this idea for us to get involved in this dark skies issue. So specifically, we wanted to understand the impact of light pollution on birds that were migrating through the Salt Lake Valley, and to work to mitigate that impact on all of our birds. So as many of you know, when birds are migrating at night, they can be drawn off course and drawn into these brightly lit urban environments. The Salt Lake Valley is a population center in Utah, so there are lots and lots of lights here. We're also located on a really important migratory flyway, so we have lots and lots of birds flying through this area. So it just seemed like a really good fit for our two organizations to partner and try and work on this issue and try and work to make the Salt Lake Valley skies darker and safer for the birds. So next slide. So we began this process doing a number of awareness building events at Tracy Aviary. We got very creative in coming up with a lot of fun activities that would bring people in the door and kind of inform them about this issue and let them leave sort of with a call to action to go and make some changes. So among these many activities that we tried out, we forced people to stay up super late until the birds were migrating at night, and we did migration moon watches where you can use a scope to look up at the full moon and you can actually see the little tiny silhouettes of these birds migrating past the face of the moon, which is a really cool experience if any of you have ever seen that. We did kids-themed, migration games. We had visitors from the aviary, so like owl visitors, come and visit people and talk about this issue. We had a number of really fantastic presentations by Jess to really inspire people and inform them about the importance of dark skies. So since we started this in 2016, we've hosted 2 to 4 of these outreach events a year, and we've engaged over 500 members of our local community who have come to these events and kind of learned more about this issue. Next slide. So in 2017, we decided that we really wanted to expand our work. And so we started a citizen science bird building collision survey. So we called this the Salt Lake Avian Collision Survey, or SLACS. And basically what it was is we trained a really dedicated group of citizen scientist volunteers to go to downtown Salt Lake City and do surveys in 20 blocks in downtown Salt Lake to look for birds that had collided with buildings. So these migratory birds that had been drawn into our area and then ended up colliding with buildings. So next slide. Yeah, so no one had ever done this type of work in Salt Lake City before. These types of programs had gone on in a lot of big cities around the country and the continent, but we really didn't know what we would find when we started this. So we had a relatively small sample size because this was just a small group of dedicated people going out to all of these buildings. But even so, we definitely saw that there was a problem, that we were seeing birds, coming into the urban environment here and colliding with buildings. So this is just a summary of some of those collisions that we have. Similar to a lot of the other bird building collision surveys that are happening across the continent, we see a lot of warblers and a lot of sparrows that are really being impacted a lot by this issue. Next slide. So we also wanted to understand, once these birds have been drawn into the urban environment, what is it about certain buildings that are really causing them to collide with that glass, collide with that building? So we did a small analysis in 2017 where we took measurements of these collision sites, of these buildings where the birds had collided, and we compared them to a random sample of buildings, and we got some better ideas for these characteristics that were sort of especially dangerous for these birds that had been drawn into the area. Next slide. And so at the beginning of this year, this work had kind of culminated, and we used this momentum from our outreach events and some of this information that we were collecting with our citizen science study, and we launched Lights Out Salt Lake. So this is a local initiative. We're asking buildings, businesses, residents of the Salt Lake Valley to turn out their lights at night during the bird migration season, to make the area darker and safer for birds. We've done a lot to spread the word about this initiative, so we've been featured in newspaper articles, TV news, radio programs. We have held a number of Lights Out launch parties to get people excited and knowing about this initiative. We also have passed out over 450 yard signs, so participants can put them in their front yard and let their neighbors know what they're doing and how they're helping. And I'm really excited about the momentum of this program. A lot of people really love birds, and I think we found it to be a really great rallying point to get people kind of understanding and interested and caring about this issue and understanding the importance of dark skies. So I'm very glad that through our partnership, we can contribute this, small local work to all of this great work that's going on across the state of Utah. And yeah, I will end with that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Goldsmith, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Architecture and Planning at the University of Utah. I'm in the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning. And about 3 years ago, a friend of the world's dark skies sent me an email and said, I'd like to have a cup of coffee with you and introduce you to John Barentine. And I said, okay, it's not far from my office. I'll walk over. I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. And at that moment, it was presented to the university through this conversation, an opportunity to create what really has become the first research institution in the world, to take the study of dark skies into a really disciplined way of investigating the social, environmental, and economic collision or connections around the dark skies. So this, what I'm going to describe to you, is really the leadership of others. The leadership of Betty Maya Foote. The leadership, she was a student in the honors program at our college and needed an advisor to look at light pollution on our campus, and I had the privilege of working with her there. Adam, one of our graduate students who's now with IDA, was looking at ways to look at Moab, Utah, one of the beautiful gateways to arches and needles, other parts of our dark sky repertoire here in Utah. And it was at that moment that I really became a midwife, actually, to try to shepherd this into the institution and say, what can we do at the University of Utah to make a consortium, a real center around dark skies, come to light? And that was the beginning. It was the leadership of IDA, the leadership of John Barentine, and one of the dear friends of the night sky. So we are now a formal center at the University of Utah. It is housed within our College of Architecture and Planning because we need to teach a new generation of architects how not to pollute the night sky. And we need to help our planning students understand how to create ordinances and policies to not only help preserve the night skies, but mitigate the night skies. So we're doing that work, and we're becoming really a specialist in doing this, along with the support and leadership of IDA. And we have a multidisciplinary design program as well, and that multidisciplinary design program is looking at ways of how do we design better lighting? How do we design exhibitions, such as what our undergraduate students just did at the Museum of Natural History in Utah? They created an exhibition which is supposed to be up for 3 weeks, where people can come and crank a dial to show what light pollution does to reduce our access to the night sky. And it's not quite a permanent exhibition. You saw the senior vice president in front of this, but this was undergraduate student work that became so connected with the challenges of preserving the night sky that they created this elegant exhibition. And if you are down in Salt Lake and have a chance to see it, see it. So this is, if we go to the next slide. So we've created a bit of a constellation here across all the disciplines on our campus. There really is not a college that does not have a connection to the night sky. Whether we're looking through the lens of religion, whether we're looking through multicultural studies, whether we're trying to dismantle this sort of Western view of the night sky through the lens of the Greeks and begin to look at it through the lens of First People, through the lens of Islam, through the lens of other peoples. This is a way of bringing this interdisciplinary study to light. And if all goes as planned, beginning in about 60 days, we're forming a minor in dark sky studies at the University of Utah. This will be the first dark sky minor. So imagine a group of planners that can go out into the world and have this specialization. Imagine communities that might be able to hire them to help with mitigating and preserving the night skies. So you can imagine you all are very knowledgeable about this. And I do want to say that to be with all of you here today at a time when California is burning, at a time when this country is going through all of its volatility, to be in a room with all of you here at 7,500 feet, where we're finding the common ground in the night skies is a beautiful moment, and I hope we can hold on to that for the next 96 hours. Next slide, please. How do we do this? So I was the planning director in Salt Lake City during the 2002 Olympic Winter Games, and we had all kinds of light pollution specifically from the games. And finding ways to manage that was a very difficult thing to do. And all you need to do is see a shot like this and say, how do we do this? How did planners let this happen? How did we lose our humility around the night sky that we could make this happen? So cap it, put a hat on that, get the light down where it needs to be, and keep us with that access, that connection. I had mentioned earlier today that most people have more of connection today with satellites and not with the stars. Our connections with the satellites comes because of these, but not with the stars. So reconnecting our students with the humanity of dark sky studies is one of the things we do. Next slide. And one of the ways we do this, and this was also with our honor scholars, was trying to get them to understand what is it about artificial light that we're really not thinking about? And at the flip of a switch, can we get them to understand the ecology of night skies? You know, students come to the University of Utah thinking that this is where their light comes from. So they create, right? This is where our electricity comes from. Like this is where our water comes from. So this is about reconnecting. So what we did is the students created this stainless steel light fixture to put in the dormitories. We call it impact image, and each student could choose the image they wanted. But at the flick of a switch, you go start tracing back through the wires to all of those places, back to the origin of our electricity, through the panels, to the generation of power, to the men and women who actually risked their lives to get the coal that we really don't need to create our lighting. But to connect that to the humanity. So it's about really making the invisible visible, something that we do with all kinds of tools. So these are little ways that our students are working to help sensitize our connections, the inner connections, to all the night skies. The last slide, please. So, you know, Neil is here from time to time, and he has an occasion to say brilliant things. And it really is this transdisciplinary way of looking at all of the connections, again, the environmental, the social, and the economic, that is at the root of our Consortium for Dark Sky Studies' brilliant future. Thank you.
Hello, I am Emily Moench. I'm with the Utah Office of Tourism. We are a branch of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and it is our mission to inspire out-of-state and international travel to Utah. And it wasn't that long ago that Utah really wasn't a known destination for travelers. Our strategy was based on how do we get people here? So we launched a few campaigns, and next slide. They worked, and we're now seeing incredible economic impact. And now, instead of saying, how are we going to do this, we're saying, oh gosh, what have we done? What are we going to do with all these people? So we've seen such an increase of visitation. We even had some areas contact us and say, stop, this isn't sustainable. We can't keep up with your marketing. So in response, we started a sustainable tourism strategy. Next slide. It's dubbed the Red Emerald Initiative. Red emeralds are a gem found only in Utah in large quantities, and they're rare. They are sought after, and we wanted to devise a strategy that was like this red emerald. We don't necessarily need more tourists. We want to target visitors who will stay longer, who want a more immersive experience, who will appreciate the local culture, who will respect the geography and the dark skies. So about the time when we launched this campaign, we learned what our Utah state parks were doing and trying to get their accreditations. And it aligned so perfectly with our Red Emerald Initiative that we decided that it should be a major part of our campaign. And so we launched an astrotourism campaign. Next slide. We figured that it was going to be so effective for us because experiencing night skies requires either an overnight stay or people staying later into the day. It also requires visiting off-peak hours, especially at the national parks. So getting people off the beaten path, visiting at times when there isn't crowding at the parks was really important, and dark skies just lends itself so perfectly to that. So we came up with some digital content, a lot of social media posts, a video, and public relations. Next slide. One of our stories, we hired a local journalist to talk about some of our dark sky programs, and he definitely highlighted what our state parks are doing. Next slide. We came up with several stories on our website that we were promoting through digital ads and digital campaigns. Next slide. And we even came up with a 4-day itinerary for stargazing at the national parks. Next slide. I came up with this Dark Skies pitch in May of 2015, and I get to pitch a lot of exciting things. I get to talk to journalists about skiing, about our craft breweries and distilleries, all of the exciting things that Utah has to offer. But my most successful pitch by far has been Dark Skies. People are so interested in it. One of my challenges is having activities at these dark sky parks for visitors to do. So I must say I'm very excited for the next breakout of designing meaningful public programs. Next slide. That's about it. But if you have questions about any of the programs that we have or want to be involved, please shoot me an email. Thank you.
Wow, 7 fantastic presentations, and I commend you all for keeping on time because that leaves us more time for questions. You probably wondered what it means to be the MC of an entire meeting. It means that people come and they hand you Post-it notes as you're sitting trying to listen and pay attention. A couple of things I just want to mention right now before we get further into it. As was started, I think at least before last year's Boston meeting, we're trying to get the word out on social media that we're here and we're active and we're having a great time. So we want you to post to your social media accounts, however you want to do it, using the hashtag 2018AGM. And in particular, feel free to take selfies out by the front table and post them on all your favorite sites. Also you can, we haven't quite uploaded any of these presentations yet, but you can follow along on YouTube. We'll be posting a link for that on social media. I want to call your attention to this wonderful little handout. It is not a placemat. It's full of good information about what these folks have been talking about, the uptick in fantastic activity here in the state of Utah over the last few years, but actually going all the way back to 1969 in Bryce Canyon. So I want to open it up for questions, but as is my prerogative as the moderator, I want to start with a question for any of you that wish to. You don't need to all answer it, but it was mentioned early on that you've got this blob of 2 million people and their lights in the middle of all you're trying to do. And I think there's a perception, especially when so many parks are involved, that people think, oh, great, if we want dark skies, we can always go to the parks. We don't need to have dark skies here. I noted as I was down poking around that Salt Lake City has a lower crime rate than a lot of similar-sized cities in the country. For example, it's lower than in Portland, Oregon. And so what are the perceptions within the cities here in Utah in terms of trying to extend this wonderfulness that you've all engendered for dark skies to try to get the lighting within the cities themselves under control? Anyone?
I'll pass that down to Stephen.
Okay. Stephen.
It says it's on, but...
It is, or it was on. There you go. Try now.
I think the first thing to say is that the interest in 2 things. One is preserving the night sky throughout the state of Utah, and especially in our rapidly urbanizing places, is really peaked. So there's the preservation strategies that we're working on. Then there are the mitigation strategies that they're working on. And the ways that we're getting people to connect to this is just to look. And one of the things that we do is to get them to use their memory. We use memory as a planning tool. Think of a time when you were out with your family. Where did you go? Did you go camping? Did you go hunting? And just to use those experiences as a way to reconnect people to their night sky. Once that happens, people become attached to these ways of understanding that it's something to lose. And then we can connect them with IDA, which is what we really like to do, because that's where so much of the expertise and so many of the tools and techniques that we need to do that happens. So it's really about observation, from what I can tell. It's getting people just to look up and see what they can't see that they want to return to a time when those warm nights with a family could connect them. They could sit and they could have a fantasy about their future. They could think about the future. And the other thing that we talk about is that if one of the crises of our time is a crisis of the imagination, and making sure that we don't lose that sense of wonder is a piece of what we do to reconnect people to the night skies. Does that answer your question?
It's a start. Great. Anybody else? And before anyone else answers, if any of you in the audience have questions, this is great, but would you please line up at this microphone right here so that we can all hear what your questions are?
So also with that, I know at least in Davis County where we do a lot of our work, we do get differing levels of engagement. So we have some cities that are very, very much excited and willing and interested in pursuing dark sky lighting and ordinances, and then others that offer a lot of pushback. So a lot of that has been trying to just invite those city leaders out to the park to see what they could be seeing in their backyard, and that has made a big difference for a lot of folks.
I was privileged to help advise. There was a recent Utah joint resolution passed by the legislature to recommend shielded lighting to the state. So that was really, really cool. And I got to help advise on that. But when I was in front of the committee discussing the benefits of dark sky, all of a sudden the different legislators were saying, well, I'm from where there's better dark skies than where you're from in these rural areas, and they were competing for who had the best dark sky. And I thought that was really cool. But one of the things we see is that our rural populations have until very recently taken those beautiful dark skies for granted, and now they're saying, what? You know, other people don't get to see this, and oh my gosh, it's been a revelation both ways.
Right, and I think it's sort of universally true that people who live in rural communities who still have dark skies want to preserve them, and that's where the leaders come in terms of lighting policy and so forth. And it's in the cities that's the toughest nut to crack, not only because their skies are already light polluted, but controlling light pollution in a complex urban residential environment. It's tough to find high quality, meaningful ordinances and such that are satisfactory to all the stakeholders, right? Anybody else? Because we're looking to Utah for the answers here, okay?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, so in my presentation I mentioned that birds are a really great rallying point for people, and I think the key to making these really bright cities more dark sky friendly is finding those rallying points and those pieces that people can really start to see the benefit of those dark skies, even if, you know, right now when they're in the city they can't look up and see the stars, but so some of those economic benefits, saying that there are energy savings to be had. The bird argument is great, at least from my point of view, saying that you can, you know, help all of these creatures that are flying overhead. So I think there are some ways to just find those rallying points and those different pieces that people care about.
I just want to read one thing from my flyer that kind of fits this theme.
This is the one that you have a whole box of?
Yes, lots of them. Please come get one. The Dark Sky Cooperative encourages community-based landscape-scale approaches to dark sky conservation and recognizes that civic engagement is the foundation for a shared stewardship of starry sky heritage. And just the short time I've been involved, I've seen this, and a lot of times it just takes one person, community champions, like for Tori, Mary Bedingfield-Smith. She drove that. Currently in Helper, Utah, Lenise Peterman, the mayor, is driving dark sky. They just adopted some lighting go down there. Kanab, I mean, just the power of one person is incredible in these communities.
Okay, hold that thought and that microphone. Let's take our first question. Please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hi. Hello.
Hold on. Let's get that. Can we get this mic live? It's live. We're told it's live.
Hello? Okay. Just have to stand close. I'm Dan Dorisco. I'm from California. Kind of elaborating on Kelly's question then. I noticed the theme is dark sky protection, although there is one person here with the biological aspect of it. And I know the Utah's kind of a conservative state anyway, but the use of the term light pollution is probably not coming up in your flyers quite as much as dark sky protection. I know that it kind of turns some of the lawmakers off, but I think in order for this subject to gain real traction in the political arena, I was wondering how both the state and the big cities in Utah think about the escaped light into the environment as actually being harmful or a pollutant that needs to be controlled.
Thank you for that question. In the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning, this is something we take very, very seriously. We are having our students come to understand the health impacts of artificial light. We're coming to understand the need to develop more sensitive policies. And here's one of the ways we do it. If a college student has a party one night and the sound of the music is too loud, neighbor calls the police come and say, you've got to turn your music down. On the other hand, if you're trying to get to sleep and somebody's bright light from their garage is in your window, some cities don't have nuisance ordinances. You can't call the cops and say, come and turn off your light. You are affecting my health, you're affecting my sleep, I'm being medicated because of my anxiety, I'm getting sleeping pills. I mean, all of these health impacts, that's why we're talking about the intersectionality of this. So the light pollution piece is big in our College of Architecture and Planning. And again, IDA's helped us find some good model ordinances. We're invited by communities around the state to bring our students in to help them develop new policies and ordinances. So it is very much that. What we find is that if we build on the assets, look at the assets first, and then get people to connect to that, and then talk about how to preserve that, it's a much better thing than putting our fingers out and saying, you know, you've got light pollution. The sensitivities in this conservative state are very, very big, as you have acknowledged. It's a big, big challenge for us.
Others? Anyone?
Thank you.
Raise your hand and we'll get the mic to you if so. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Hi, Diane Knutson from South Dakota. My question's for Stephen on classes. Are there any options for remote extension or other students from other universities or School of Mines and Technology to connect and take any classes through the program?
Yeah, because I want to take some of those classes too.
Well, thank you for opening that door. We do have a very good remote facility in our university. We teach all over the state from our university. If there's a desire to do that, talk to me and we can talk about that. For the next semester, we're developing the syllabi for the core courses. And those core courses are around cosmology and astronomy. Those core courses about health. Those core courses about the humanities side of this, art, music, religion, etc. We'll be developing that again during this next semester if all goes as planned. We'll launch our courses next fall. So there will always be that opportunity for an extension. We're looking at doing this also with our community college in town. So please, for any of you who might be interested in this, let me know. I'd be happy to begin to talk to you about that. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm from Beijing. I'm an owner of for-profit observatory companies, and I'm currently raising a new IDA chapter in Tibet. So my question is, I have found that the IDA just launched just have some significant concern about some lighting program in Sichuan province of China. It is available in the front page of the IDA website, and I have some direct connections to the governors over there. So would you please summary? So maybe you guys, is there any dedicated website or materials summarizing your experience to working with the government in Utah and the universities? So I'd like to learn your best practice, and I have checked the websites of Utah and the Utah University. It seems still no dedicated websites. So maybe in the future, so you can have all your best practices summarized in some websites, and we can learn and how to communicate with governors to push the champion better. Thank you.
I want to say that one of the best practices is to find what will attract your particular government official that you are working with. Is it financial savings from smarter lighting that doesn't spend, it doesn't cost as much energy? Is it astrotourism, some financial gain for that, and notoriety and prestige for the area? It isn't always the environmental cause that's going to sway environmental government officials. So you need to find out, though, what facet of that will work for them, and in my experience, you hit that.
Anyone else? From my own experience, you know, it was mentioned that one person can make a difference. That would be you, right? And you need one ear to hear your message. Finding one person on a city council who is at least willing to listen, because I think it's been our collective experience that it isn't that people are opposed to what we're trying to do, they don't know about it. And our number one goal is primarily education. And when you point out the challenges of, you know, high color temperature lighting versus low, or lack of shielding, or sky glow issues, or environmental, you know, nocturnal wildlife issues, they go, oh, I didn't realize that. Now, that may not necessarily get you an automatic okay, right? Yes. Thumbs up, but at least it opens up a dialogue. And then maybe what you'll do is that person will invite you to come and speak to the local council or so forth. In terms of your specific question about success stories in working with local governments, I think that's what you're asking for, right? What are the experiences, the good experiences that we collectively and individually have had? I think that's a great idea for the IDA website. Don't you agree, Amanda? To have a sort of a watering hole where people can tell their stories. I'll tell you one thing. I can cite one big city success story that was entirely due to the perseverance of the IDA volunteers, and that's the city of Phoenix. And they spoke to us a couple of years ago where they got the ear of the city council, and not only did they succeed, they got them to reverse a bad decision regarding the conversion of the city's hundreds of thousands of street lights to a better quality with a unanimous vote. So again, I think those success stories are out there, and it's a really good point. I think we need a way to collect those stories as a guide to what works and what doesn't work. Thank you.
Can I just add one more thing? One of Zach's interns at Cedar Breaks was the young lady. She was a student at SUU, I think Southern Utah University, and she was doing an internship at Cedar Breaks, and she is the one who brought the idea of that ordinance that was passed by not the ordinance, but the joint resolution. And it sometimes won't be a relationship like on an official level, but it'll be a constituent or a young person that is inspired that will move the government to move.
Thank you for bringing it up. Next, please.
Yes, Alan Eastman from Salt Lake City. Was that on?
Yeah, it's on. Just
okay.
We'll turn it up and down as we need to, Alan.
This is mostly for Zach and Emily. As a Utahn familiar with the politics of southern Utah, I'm wondering how you're doing at actually bringing in some of the locals. I know in Blanding and Monticello and that area, they're interested in anything that will bring in jobs in mining and oil drilling. But anything that smacks of tourism, despite all the good things you had to say, Emily, they don't seem to be very interested in. How are we doing, and what can we do to help change that a little bit?
We've had a pretty good amount of success in Cedar City and St. George. The Master Astronomer program that I described a little while ago, like I said, we've had 45 participants, and they've all been people from the local community. We have one of our local mayors participating right now. So we have not, I guess I would say we haven't had trouble getting people on board in our community with promoting dark sky preservation. I know that's not the case everywhere. Obviously, 45 people is, it's not a huge cross-section of the community, but we're spending 40 hours with those 45 people and really giving them a pretty in-depth introduction to the many different benefits of dark sky preservation, right? It's not just the astronomy side, it's not just the tourism side, right? We talk about the ecological effects, we talk about the economical effects, and we really try to come at it from all those different angles, and we found that pretty much everyone that goes through our program, there's something that ends up resonating with them, whether it's the astronomy side or not. There's something that they can connect with, and they're spurred on to further action within their communities. So,
aren't those kind of self-selected, though?
Pardon me?
Aren't those kind of self-selected?
To some extent, but that's good, right? When mayors of local municipalities self-select and come to us and say, we want to take that program, we see that as progress. So. Yeah.
So part of our initiative for this Red Emerald sustainable tourism has been a community-led vision, and we've gone on listening tours and really tried to engage communities in hearing how they want to be positioned within tourism. And we try to take that into account in our promotions, and also listening to when people want us to back off, and also trying to take a more managerial perspective than just promotion, and trying to help communities who are experiencing over-tourism manage where they send people when and the types of visitors that we're attracting. And I think once they know that we are open to letting them help guide our initiatives and trying to get the right people into their communities, people have been pretty supportive.
Just one piggyback onto that. Your sensitivity to this is clear. But there's a shift happening that we're noticing. This past Wednesday, I received a letter from the mayor of Escalante asking us to bring a group of undergraduate students down to help them look at their future. As you probably know, about a year and a half ago, the state did what's called the Marshall Plan for Utah, for the southern part, because of the change in the fossil fuel industries and unemployment. We have high rates of unemployment there. So the state is now looking to work with us to find ways to create re-employment strategies, job training strategies. So when we're getting that kind of outreach from a mayor from Escalante, for example, this is a very contested area. As you may know from the national parks and the splitting of our national parks, I'd say that there's a shift in that. So I think we all can adjust to that shift, adapt to that shift. There's some beautiful opportunities emerging.
Okay, thanks. This will be our last question for the panel.
My name is Andreas Hähnel from Germany, so I'm one of these German tourists, and I do not want to question, but I just want to comment on 3 points. The first point, I had the chance during the last 3 days, no, I should say nights, to visit a half dozen of these parks, and it was very impressive. Some I couldn't enter because they were closed, but nevertheless, this was very interesting. And then coming here at Amsterdam Airport in the Netherlands, I found this journal, and there is a double page about the Utah star parks in this. So you see, it's very well known worldwide. And the third comment, I would like to invite the Utah Tourist Board, because since 2 years we have astrotourism issue at the International Tourist Börse, the largest, I think it's the largest tourist fair in Germany, the ITB. We have there a session about astrotourism, and I always saw that Utah is represented there, so I think it would be good to participate also in this astrotourism session. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Andreas. Anyone want to comment to that, or no? Well, this has been a terrific panel, and it has opened a window into this marvelous state and all that's going on here. I want to thank you very, very much again for all of your different perspectives on it, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So let's have another hand for them. And while they're leaving, I want to invite up Michael McKigg.